The universe, an infinite, unknown space where anything and everything could have come into existence. But if this really is the case, then how can we even minimally believe that there are no other forms of life in the universe besides our own? And if other forms of life existed, that they weren't already trying to get in touch with us? Many have already deliberated on the topic of contacteeism. That is why we wanted to contact an internationally renowned researcher who will be able to accompany us on this fascinating journey. A journey through space, time, alien bases, our world and other planets, but above all, the history of humanity and ultimately its future. I'm currently a researcher and a disseminator, but I come from the world of television. I began to collaborate with national television at the end of the 90s with the program Stargate, which acquired a documentary I had written, and I was also the director and the editor. And then I moved on to collaborating with the Voyager program on Rye 2, which I collaborated with more or less until 2010. Why did I end up on television? Because before doing this, I was performing research in the extraterrestrial ufological field. Since I was a child, in my homeland of Sardinia, I had direct experiences with this phenomenon. Then, at the age of 28, at the time I was a railway engineer, a work colleague told me about a gentleman called Eugenio Siragusa, who passed away in 2006. And he said that he had had physical encounters with extraterrestrials. And frankly, I didn't believe this, because I replied that if anyone, some person or any human being, had spoken directly with extraterrestrials, it would have been the news of the century. All the news and all the newspapers would have spoken about it. My colleague told me that wasn't the case, but driven by curiosity, yet skeptical, I managed to contact this gentleman and finally meet him. And meeting him, I realized that the story he was telling was true, that he really had this encounter, and over time I obviously also understood why this information was not known by the general public, why it wasn't conveyed through the media as it existed at the time, and we're talking about 1988. A conspiracy of silence that distorts and denies extraterrestrial visits. So I began to do some research. I met a study group who I became friends with, which was here in the Marche region, and we all began to travel the world, managing to meet even high-profile characters from the military, the intelligence and scientific worlds, even Russian cosmonauts. So this material, which was obviously attractive to television, was the reason for collaboration with these high-level programs, which then, over time, these programs were also broadcast on many international television networks: the United States, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Australia. My programs were everywhere. Then, at a certain point, I left television because I couldn't say certain things. I wasn't allowed to reveal everything I was discovering with my research. So I left that world, and as I said, I continued my research and dissemination work. Who knows on how many occasions beings from another world have tried to get in contact with us. For this reason, we wonder, what is meant by direct contact? Direct contact because these beings, having met the ostracism from the great world powers, with whom there have been diplomatic meetings with many presidents such as Khrushchev, Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy, and also minor level meetings with embassies, for example, an interview with a former Ecuadorian diplomat who, in the embassy of Ecuador in Peru, in Lima, was visited by the commander of an extraterrestrial fleet, who, for a certain period of time, gave them information, including sensitive material at a geopolitical level. So let's say from Siragusa's knowledge, subsequently I come to find out an infinity of information over time, given that I had certain proof that these beings exist. I also had direct interaction with this intelligence, that they come from the cosmos. Therefore, contact exists worldwide, and the phenomenon called contacteeism is born, since there is this great conspiracy of silence, and therefore, not being able to convey their message through the mass media networks, they began to contact simple people, who then become a kind of ambassador, or let's say vehicles who disseminate the information to civil society, and also the probative material that these beings want to bring, to give proof of their presence, but above all, also to convey their social, philosophical and spiritual concepts. These beings, obviously I'm speaking of the information acquired in over 30 years of research up until this year, 2023. I've been investigating this phenomenon for 34 years. I've travelled the world, as I said. I've had meetings at the highest level. Even in the 90s, our research group was invited to a Russian military atomic base, where the commander at the time testified to us of the direct experiences that they had with this extraterrestrial aviation. We even gave a conference to the military and their family members who lived on this gigantic base that is in fact a city, about 2 hours by road from Moscow. So this very important information that I was obtaining over time, I also began to perform my research as a retrospective discourse to try to understand how long these beings have been operating on the Earth. To my huge surprise, I discovered that these beings have been with us since the dawn of history. In fact, they have always been close to humanity, and in a certain which way, and I won't go into the merits, these beings have to do with the same origin of humanity. So they know us very well, perhaps much better than we know ourselves. And they have all the chronological history of humanity, which is much, much more ancient than what official historians tell us, because many things are kept hidden, even to this day. I can even testify there is all this proof, even archaeological proof, that these beings told us. We have the proof that humanity already existed at the time of the dinosaurs, so we are much older than what we are told. So, an alien race would have been living among us for years, if not centuries, or even longer. Therefore, it must be legitimate to ask, how does an alien race manage to disguise itself whilst living among the human race? I was a personal friend of a former NATO secret agent. He even came to my home on holiday, here in the Marche region in the 1990s. His name was Robert Dean, and he was a sergeant major who, with the special assignments he received from a very powerful American general called Lemnitzer, he was sent to NATO headquarters in Europe, which at the time was still in France. This American soldier discovers in the safe where the secrets on the Warsaw Pact were hidden, or being kept, we are obviously in the time of the Cold War, he discovered a voluminous envelope that was named, or entitled, Assessment. This Sergeant Major, Robert Dean, having a very high-level assignment from this powerful general, had the authorization at the level of secrecy involving this envelope, which was cosmic top secret, a real level of secrecy that exists. I've also had evidence of it at the level of investigations into anti-mafia and Freemasonry, So the cosmic top secret level really exists. Well, in this document, this assessment, Robert Dean discovers that there was a secret NATO study program, even in collaboration with the Warsaw Pact, because there had been a flyover of 30 unknown objects close to the border between the East and the West, therefore the area of Germany. About 30 objects. The alarm was sounded because NATO thought it was an attack, because the objects came from east to west, then stopped and turned back. So alarms were sounded in both factions, who feared that it was a surprise nuclear attack. They consulted each other and discovered that these were objects from neither side, so both factions requested information from their higher levels. And receiving nothing, NATO and the Warsaw Pact allied and started this study. And this study into understanding the nature of these objects came to establish that it was a fleet of 30 flying saucers that had played this little game. They came from east to west, then vice versa. If I remember well, there was a kind of U-turn. They discovered that they were 4 different races of extraterrestrials. This NATO Warsaw Pact program discovered that there were 4 different extraterrestrial races that already in the 60s had visited us. One of these races was the spitting image of us, that is totally human, to the point that we could say, a white race, that the military realized that these beings, thanks to their high scientific or technical knowledge, could also dress as soldiers and enter undisturbed any base or any military installation. Robert Dean discovered that secrecy and security protocols were greatly intensified, and this important document, where there was evidence such as photos, films and other things that proved that this story was true, therefore creating a voluminous envelope, was distributed to all the NATO countries, including Italy. Therefore, high-level Italian authorities know this reality very well. This is a study from the 60s. Over time, things have evolved, and today we can say that the types of races that visit us are among the most varied. Here I would like to highlight a point. Many people ask disseminators like me, are extraterrestrials like us? And I reply, us who? Like the Tutsi, the Pygmies, the Aborigines, like Norwegians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the native Indians. Who should the extraterrestrials look like? Considering that on Earth we have a variety of racial typologies, skin colors which are among the most, let's say, different, therefore the extraterrestrials are the same. There are many races. A race that becomes notorious is that of the Greys. This happened starting from about 1978. Before, in fact, the existence of the Greys was unknown. They are usually small beings with very large heads and these large black oval eyes, which in reality we know are mainly clones. They are subjects created in the laboratory by human-like extraterrestrials. These clones are used in those missions that the extraterrestrials put in place, above all when they approach humanity directly, and in many cases also in the military field. But there are really many races. In my opinion, the discussion should not focus on physical aspects, but instead we must understand who they are, why they come, and what they want, rather than what type of face or skin color they have. I think this is much more important. Why did they choose to stay here among us? And given that they did, what are their real objectives regarding the human race and humanity itself? As I said, who are they, why do they come, and what do they want? So the purpose of their visit to our planet. Mainly, but not only, there is an even more important reason, but much more difficult to understand. Mainly, they control the evolution of terrestrial atomic science and technology, because since they have understood that terrestrials are not so sane in the head, they could arrive at a nuclear war, to unleash an atomic war that would endanger the very physical existence of the planet. So, if unfortunately these belligerent escalations that exist on Earth led to the outbreak of an atomic war, the planet runs the risk of blowing up into a million pieces. The nuclear potential is truly frightening. We could destroy the planet dozens of times over. This would imply a frightening level of space pollution, therefore in their flight paths. And this would also generate a frightening cataclysm on a planetary level, throughout the solar system, because if the Earth explodes, all the planet's orbital balances would be affected, and in many of these planets, including the Earth, they have bases, and so also fearing the self-destruction of the human race itself, they are here, and they've been here for decades, 24 hours a day, monitoring all the terrestrial nuclear installations, including storage sites, nuclear system designs, and production sites. We now have very ample evidence because over the years we have also collected the testimonies of many soldiers, above all Americans in NATO, who recounted their direct experiences of, let's say, intrusion of extraterrestrials in the area, even deactivating entire bases. A few years ago, I met the former American commander Robert Salas. At the time, he was a captain who commanded the Malmstrom base in Montana. The incident took place in 1967, and one night, when Salas was in command, the entire base was deactivated. All the atomic missiles the base possessed were deactivated, and recently, Salas also testified to the American Congress. Then we can talk about the American Lieutenant Jacobs, who was a soldier who made videos, so he was a military filmmaker, and among his various tasks he had to film nuclear tests, and he testifies that while he was filming the launch of an atomic ballistic missile, a UFO arrives that circles the flying missile, and it shoots various beams, perhaps laser beams, and the missile practically fails. It stops flying and falls to the ground. There are many of these cases. A well-known American researcher called Robert Hastings wrote a voluminous book entitled UFOs and Nukes. He even spoke about it, I think in 2008, on The Larry King Show, where Salas also intervened and Jacobs also gave his testimony. In fact, Larry King closes the program saying, "So the government deceives us, lies to us, keeps these things secret. Therefore, the control of nuclear power in order to save the planet and humanity itself is one of the reasons. But there is a much bigger, much higher reason. That is, to give terrestrial humanity a whole series of information that allows us to have a new vision of life. Because if we don't have a new vision of life, a change in humanity's attitudes is impossible. And since the current attitudes of humanity are belligerent and self-destructive, they want to inject into our society scientific, philosophical, social and technological concepts to help us make a qualitative leap in our consciousness. This is fundamental, very important. So, in fact, these beings are collaborating to a rebirth of mankind, therefore to a new era. They are an integral part of it. Then there is an even more complex aspect. I won't go into it, the spiritual one, where by spiritual I'm not talking about religion. These beings have no religious creed. For them the spiritual part of the human being is the noblest part and must be studied by science. Why do I say this? Why do they say this? If I'm a believer, I know that I have a physical part, which is the body. If I'm a believer, I also know that I have a spiritual part. Now you should explain to me how a scientific part, the body, can enter into a relationship with a religious belief that may exist or not. It's obvious that if spirit and body are two sides of the same coin, it's a scientific matter, the science of matter and the science of spirit. So these beings want to bring us information that finally allows humanity to understand the great questions of life. Who are we? Where are we going? Why were we created? What's life? What is death? What happens after death? And so on. These very important themes, for which the most part of society is still groping in the dark, are fundamental. To find out if there is life after death, what is the spirit? Who created us? Why did they create us? Where are we going? I think this is all fundamental. They bring us information of the highest level on all this. I, beyond studying the extraterrestrial phenomenon, above all I study their science. I have a lot of information in this field. So can we assume that these extraterrestrial life forms are a kind of guardians of the galaxy who oversee and enforce the universal laws? But the human race has only ever been to the moon and has never attempted interplanetary travel. What purpose would these guardians of the galaxy have in controlling the Earth and the human race?
Is it remotely possible to think that we are their creation? So the purpose of their visits is also to check if their creation is going down a certain path.
So the answer to certain questions, and this is one of them, is very complex because it requires a significant knowledge base, especially in the area that I mentioned before, the religious or spiritual one. So we are not an extraterrestrial breeding ground, and that they come to check that their chickens are gaining weight? Absolutely not. Because we have to make a distinction. What is the human being? Is the human being the physical part or the metaphysical part? Is a human being the body or the spirit? So the extraterrestrials certainly have to do with the physical structure, of which they have participated in its creation, but have nothing to do with the spiritual part that pertains to the divine world, because we are spirit and the extraterrestrials are spirit, so we all come from the same source. In fact, they call us Earthlings brothers, even if they are an abyss of time older than us, even billions of years. There are races that saw the Big Bang that gave birth to this cosmos. We are talking about really complex things, so man's physical part certainly has to do with them. The true, important, eternal, noble part of man, that is the spirit, comes from the divine. But I'll stop here, because answering the question, what is God, would be extremely complex, and I think it would go beyond the theme of this documentary. Being so much older than we are, extraterrestrials have support bases throughout the solar system, everywhere, even on the moons of Jupiter, of Saturn, even on our moon. Obviously, they also have many bases on their planet, because considering the enormity of extraterrestrial aviation activity, taking into account that they monitor 24 hours a day all nuclear installations in the world, including research and storage sites, they cannot always come and go from their home, and therefore they have numerous bases on Earth. Among them, and the information we have, is that Italy is the place where they have one of their largest bases in Europe. So it is a condition that is now proven by researchers and ufologists and others, that there are many extraterrestrial bases on our planet, both on the mainland and under the sea. Many of them, for example, there is an Italian case called the Friendship Case, which speaks of this gigantic base, which would be more or less between Pescara and Rimini, so about 300 kilometers long, 150 kilometers wide, so half under the Adriatic and half more or less up to the Gran Sasso mountain. So we are talking about truly impressive construction capabilities. But this isn't the only Italian base. There are others in the north and the south, so a very complex matter. I repeat, if they have been here on Earth since time immemorial, imagine what they have been able to achieve in the meantime. For example, I know they've said that they've had bases on the moon for over 175,000 years. So we are talking about really, really big stuff. If the Earth is full of tunnels that extraterrestrials use to move between their various bases, does this have any implications for the Earth's magnetic field or present any danger to humanity?
So, there are areas of our planet with very high energy level magnetic fields, which create problems for plane flights and many other situations.
Absolutely yes. Actually, there is an anomaly of the Earth's field, which is called the South Atlantic anomaly, if I'm not mistaken. This anomaly, which descends to much lower altitudes and also interferes with satellites, including the International Space Station itself. Besides this, there are other aspects of the planetary energy field that are little known, but which create sorts of stargates or portals, of which some are little known, mostly because we don't know what happens there. We are speaking of the Dragon's Triangle near Japan. We're talking about the Bermuda Triangle near the coast of Florida. In reality, we have much smaller anomalous zones, and we have one here on the Adriatic, and we even have some here in the Marche region. And so these anomalous points on the planet exist, and there are many of them. These points of anomaly, these stargates that exist in all of planet Earth's energy structure, are used by these beings to travel. They are also used because we know that there is an immense network of underground tunnels on a planetary level that have also been discovered by various governments, but are jealously kept hidden. But these points of anomalies, such as Bermuda or other places, are used by extraterrestrials to enter and exit the interior of the planet, where there is a great mystery that I'll briefly mention, that of the Hollow Earth, which was also a mystery that was widely studied by the Ahnenerbe of the Nazi SS, who went to Tibet in 1936 because they wanted to have information on the internal world, and then the Americans, they too, with Operation High Jump, with the famous Admiral Byrd, and they left with an army of thousands of soldiers. There was an aircraft carrier, there were planes, there were submarines. The mission was supposed to last 6 months, but in just a few weeks they went home because they understood that those people were too technically superior to be able to be even harmed by low-level terrestrial warfare technology. However, it is a very broad discourse. Even the Soviets learned of this mystery through their spies. Project Blue Beam. What is this project? And more specifically, what is its ultimate goal? Is a non-Pacific first contact about to occur? Must we prepare for an inevitable conflict with a belligerent extraterrestrial race? As for Project Bluebeam, it is an American Secret Services project. I knew about it before the world did, because in the 90s, a great American researcher, Dr. Stephen Greer, came here to our association, and while we were talking, he walks off for a moment. Then he returns and tells us he has just received information from an insider of the American intelligence services that they are developing Project Bluebeam. And obviously we asked, what's that? Basically, the idea is to exploit this extraterrestrial discourse by creating a false alien attack with drones disguised as flying saucers, and then with, let's say, very sophisticated holographic projections, they would simulate an extraterrestrial invasion. And so, with all these drones, these fake flying saucers and projections, they would simulate an attack on some city, with thousands of deaths. And this would be the perfect excuse for the elite to put the entire planet under martial law, to lock down all humanity. A topic that already, in the concepts of the New World Order, was attempted with Islamic extremism. It was attempted in other ways. Reagan was already talking about it in the 80s with the Star Wars project, etc. So, the classic false flag attack, blaming extraterrestrials to dominate humanity. Actually, then over time, we discovered that this speech was made by Wernher von Braun, the Nazi German, who then became the head of the Apollo mission, the mission that went to the moon. And shortly before he died, he had a collaborator, a young scientist called Carol Rosin, who is still alive. And von Braun explained to Carol Rosin all the phases that the powers would have used to try to dominate humanity. So he also spoke to Rosin about Islamic extremism, rogue states, and he said that the last option, if all else fails, would be the false alien invasion. I know that this has begun, and it has to do with the disclosure, the revelations that the Pentagon has started since 2017, where in December the New York Times publishes information that comes from the Pentagon, where they say that there was a secret UFO study program. In reality, it's all a big lie, because UFO studies started in the early 40s, and to date, the information that we have through military documents states that the first flying saucer recovered by the Americans was in 1941. So, you can imagine. So this topic of Pentagon disclosure of all these offices that were created in December 2021, even Biden signed a federal law regulating research and disclosure of all the information on UFOs. And this law provides for how to deal with recovered alien bodies and ships. So, all the cornerstones of the ufological discourse are present in this law today, that Biden signed because they have known them for decades. The first office to misinform the public was created in 1947, called Majestic 12, and was formed by the highest American military, political, and scientific leaders. It was created by President Truman. Then, in 1954, President Eisenhower would raise Majestic 12 to the committee level, so it's the only one that has all the information, even that of a, let's say, spiritual nature on the extraterrestrial presence. From Kennedy onwards, presidents are no longer informed about everything concerning extraterrestrials, because Kennedy wanted to divulge the truth, and this was one of the reasons why he was killed. Not the only one, obviously. Given these circumstances, what should we expect in our future?
So in your opinion, what awaits us? Spiritual advancement or mental imprisonment?
What awaits us for the future? For the immediate future, a lot of problems that have already started. Now, in these days, there has been the collapse of the banks in Silicon Valley, so the situation of the West is not at all great. There is an imbalance. The old balance, where effectively America was in charge, so there is an imbalance that is causing these wars, these clashes. there are all the transhumanistic hypotheses of microchipping humans to control them, etc. And they will fail. They will fail because this power that comes from the cosmos with 4 ridiculous henchmen, for now they let them operate because the extraterrestrials also have their own agenda. So the planetary situation will get worse in the short term. It will get worse at a geopolitical level. So the clashes, the economic crises will increase due to the evil choices of the rulers, and above all the activity or passivity of the people, who are not firmly opposed to all these policies. And then there will be an imbalance on a planetary level, because we have devastated the ecosystem, so the number of earthquakes will increase, the violence of the climate, with very powerful hurricanes on the one hand, and with climatic crises of great drought on the other. Some haven't quite understood what global warming is. It's not that the whole planet gets hotter. Climatic warming means that the planet gets much hotter somewhere, and this generates imbalances that enhance atmospheric phenomena, so we'll have frightening cold waves and frightening heat waves. The thermal imbalance that becomes more and more marked will practically give an enormous power to cyclones, hurricanes, etc. And there will be a very terrifying situation. Let's remember that 2022 was the first time an Atlantic cyclone, which usually occurs in the Gulf of Mexico, formed outside its normal area and even made it to the European coast, which had never happened before. So we are heading towards a huge climatic disaster with water bombs that suddenly create floods and so on. So this whole situation will get worse in the immediate future. But the extraterrestrial agenda is that if in the future humanity were to reach a nuclear confrontation, to save the most positive part of planet Earth, humanity obviously, and all living children in that moment, so in their agenda there is the safeguarding of the future of humanity, even in the moment of the worst crisis that could be a nuclear confrontation, they will take away all these people. And I know from the information we have, they have already reception places ready, where millions of people, certainly few compared to the 8 billion human beings existing now, but millions of people will be saved from the hell that human beings have been able to unleash with their really crazy choices. So the extraterrestrial agenda is absolutely positive. I'd even say, thanks to my study of geopolitics of the last few decades, if we still exist and nuclear war hasn't broken out, it's thanks to them. Because human beings, the heads of state, would have already unleashed it. They pressed the buttons, but the missiles did not take off. So we have to thank these beings that we are still alive. What are their plans for us and our future? They'll save the noblest part of humanity.
It seems almost like a new Eden, a new beginning maybe, for humanity.
That's effectively what it will be. Their project for humanity is magnificent. It is in fact an integration into their social system. So when they land, that is when they save humanity, they'll take it away, because it will be a disaster. Because due to the atomic explosions, there will also be an inversion of the planet's physical axis. And this will be terrible, because the Earth revolves around its axis at 1,600 kilometers an hour. It revolves around the Sun at 104,000 kilometers an hour. So, if you suddenly block the planet and there is a halt, there will be tsunamis with kilometer-high waves, frightening earthquakes. So in that moment, they will take that part of humanity away.
Is it possible that this has already happened?
It has happened various times. In reality, Noah's Ark is an allegory. There were many Noahs at that time, and there were very advanced technological objects that the various Noahs received from these beings to take humans away. For example, when the Spaniards reached the coasts of Central America, where the Maya were, the cities were already deserted. They had already been covered mostly by jungle. So where had the Maya gone? Suddenly, this magnificent civilization with incredible astronomical and mathematical knowledge disappears. There are no corpses. Yes, there are still Maya, but those who exist are the indigenous people living in those areas. Let's say the lowest part, if I can use this term. But the Maya had been taken away, as the inhabitants of Angkor Wat in Cambodia had been taken away. These beings are in fact our elder brothers and have an interest in preserving life on the planet. When humans begin to do crazy stuff and activate self-destructive processes, they intensify their surveillance and prepare a rescue plan. They did it with Atlantis 12,000 years ago. They did it with the Mu, with Lemuria. They have always intervened in great human crises. That is, they are trying to get us to an ethical stability, where we will finally understand the stupidity of evil. If you consider that to safeguard the riches of a privileged class, assets that are greater than the riches of the privileged classes are being destroyed. They're crazy. They'll lose their lives too, but they're crazy. The oldest who visit us are 15 billion years older than we are. Just think about it. Just think about where a billion years of uninterrupted evolution can take you. Look at the society of the 1800s and the current one, at a scientific level at least. So what these beings do seems like magic to us for how evolved they are. They have defeated death. They can give life back to a dead body. The problem is that we don't know who we are. We don't know what God is. We are entangled in a series of rubbish, that is, religious beliefs. But it's nonsense. It's still the infantile phase of humanity. Today we have discovered science, so we have misused material science. It's leading us to self-destruction, but we have to reach spiritual science. And these two aspects, science of physics and metaphysics, must remain in balance. Because religious fanaticism led to the Inquisition, or the Aztecs and Mayas who killed people and offered their hearts to God. Conversely, the excess of rationality has led us to wars, to 2 world wars. So we need to have balance. We need to have both sciences and balance. It's a scientific debate. Now you'll ask me, how can we have scientific proof about death? It already exists. They just don't let us know. Because if the people became aware, then the powers would stop governing. So we're not an experiment. We are divine creatures. Therefore God creates continuously. But God has a whole court of servants, and so everyone is assigned their task. Because he defends his creation. So when his creation, let's say a father whose children wee on the floor and break furniture, he has to stop them. As he made them, he can unmake them. God is the same. He leaves us freedom, but if we go astray, he makes our elder brothers intervene, saying, stop them, they're crazy. Also because our madness, not only does it not solve any problems, safeguarding the wealth of the powerful, because they'll die too, because we're destroying the planet. He performs an act of love for us too. He prevents us from reaching the extreme limits of self-destruction. So there is no experiment. There is a project, God's project, which is the happiness of his creatures. He's a father. What is a father? Here we have fathers who rape their children, but in his balanced and natural condition, the father wants good for his family, not evil. So God, who is perfect, creates us, leaves us free, but with certain limits. If we exaggerate and cause chaos, in his small way he gets angry and stops us, but he doesn't annihilate us. he doesn't make us disappear. He stops us, he puts us in a position to do no harm, and when you understand that you can't create chaos anymore, he says, now you've understood. And we can read this in the parable of the prodigal son, where the son of a wealthy father says, give me the money, I'm leaving to do my own thing. And the son, causing chaos, violating the laws of cause and effect, karma, finds himself working with pigs in pig shit, and says, maybe it's better I go back to my father's house. The prodigal son is the humanity of the earth. There are truths in religion, but the church, for reasons of power, has distorted them. Aliens among men. Different races present on Earth for centuries. It is therefore natural to ask, who was the famous alien Kenyo, known to us thanks to the friendship case? Kenyo is an extraterrestrial character who emerged from the friendship case. Among other things, the friendship case, and I say this a little perhaps selfishly, became known because I made a documentary for Rai Television, which went around the world, and which made the friendship case famous worldwide, because Professor Stefano Breccia's book, Mass Contacts, had come out, but it had, shall we say, a fairly limited distribution. I had already had some familiarity previously with this case, without understanding its significance. When Breccia's book came out, I contacted the protagonists, who had made themselves public figures. So Gaspare De Lama, Paolo Di Girolamo, Stefano Breccia, and also others who I met later, but who didn't want to testify publicly. So I dedicate myself to study, and the figure of Kenyo, who appears in this case, is the name of an extraterrestrial, more than 3 meters tall, which is visible in one of the photos that were made as part of the case. This photo shows a young man. From calculations, it seems that he is about 3.5 meters tall. He is dressed in a Hawaiian shirt, a pair of shorts, and a kind of espadrille, those shoes made of rope and fabric, and photographed in a garden. And very recently, my very dear friend, Marina Tonini, had a very impactful meeting with him, which left her with quite an important psychological, emotional aftermath, because an encounter with extraterrestrials is always very demanding. So this is Kenyo. Then the figure of this character was attacked, saying that he was a son or relative of Bruno Sammachicha, who was the leader of the Italian friendship group. There is also a friendship group in Chile, and there have been other friendship groups in various parts of the world, even in Siberia. So Kenyo is this extraterrestrial alien human. Apart from his height, he is perfectly identical to any other human, and that just recently, considering that the friendship case ended in 1978, in 2022, I think, Marina Tonini meets him again, because these beings are here. Marina Tonini, expert graphologist, writer, and worldwide famous and esteemed contactee.
What is your relationship with Marina Tonini and your experience with her?
The relationship I have with Marina is a beautiful relationship and a great friendship, with all the implications of friendship, therefore lightheartedness, confiding in and supporting each other, facing problems and solving them. A beautiful relationship which has already lasted for years. I had heard of Marina obviously from the television hype in the media that arose from her public disclosure of the contacts she had had with entities from Sirius. This is what Marina said, so I knew her from the media. A few years ago, maybe it was 2011, we were both invited, Maria as a contactee and me as a researcher, to a program on Rai 1 called La Vita in Diretta. On that occasion, we got to know each other in person. It was love at first sight, and since then we continue to see each other, to collaborate. We participate in initiatives together, conferences. I have also participated in a couple of her groups to recite the Om. An interesting relationship that gives me a lot of satisfaction, even joy and happiness. But returning to the subject of aliens, if they really are among us, is it possible for humans to recognize them? Do they have any particular characteristics that give them away?
The moment I find myself talking to a person, a stranger, is there a specific way to tell if I'm really talking to a human, or if I'm talking to some form of alien?
No. If you're not a researcher like me, you will never understand it. And even if you are a researcher like me, it's difficult. But over time, I have also learned to recognize certain somatic traits of humans who are actually from other worlds. But if the extraterrestrial, so in that case I'm talking about extraterrestrials incarnated in human bodies, and there really are a lot of them, but if the human extraterrestrial, dressed in a suit and tie like I am, or in jeans and a sweatshirt, if he doesn't want to be recognized, he won't be recognized. You only recognize him if he wants to be recognized. I have my personal experiences, and I also have friends who have had direct physical encounters with extraterrestrials, but they understood this because they made themselves known. My approaches to extraterrestrial reality, beyond the truly numerous sightings of extraterrestrial spaceships that I have had in my 34 years of research, but encounters with intelligences have been varied. When I understood it, it was because their manifestation was undoubtedly not of this world. Others because I recognized them. Then my recognition was proven by the people themselves, that I understood that they were people not of this world. So there are various aspects. Obviously, a researcher, if he does his research as it should be done, that is seriously, and above all, if it is global level research, you acquire, let's say, some skills on the study you are doing. So I happened to meet extraterrestrials. They hadn't said anything, but certain somatic characteristics, for at least some of these groups, are repetitive. And so when you have seen one, and you have proven that it is not human, and you see others, you understand that they come from the same genetic stock, let's say. So they are real. This is a certain fact. Flying saucers are real, but they are present in civil society. They are present in military organizations. They are present in intelligence organizations. They are present in scientific organizations. They are everywhere. So there is not only extraterrestrial activity in the skies or in space, there is extraterrestrial activity within human society, working for the good of humanity, to give us a little push towards a positive evolution. I recall a case that I studied in Mexico in the early 1990s. A contactee, at the time a young Mexican, who was contacted by a race of the Pleiades, some of whom lived in Mexican society and they had self-realized a genetic modification to take on the appearance of the Mayan people, those particular faces that still today anyone who goes to Mexico or Central America can see. And one of these beings, who was the contact that this Mexican boy had, taught in a kindergarten, and he was a young man of 25. But then, when he met the Mexican, the contactee, he took him to the base. He showed him the flying saucers. He filmed them. He photographed them. An extraordinary case. Unfortunately, it didn't last long, because of a whole series of problems that occur when a contactee becomes public. Therefore, the case died on the media level. They have to manage the great masses, but they also have to manage that small part of humanity that gets out of control, and then they bring it back under control. In fact, they have the information, and to a large extent also the counter-information, which is manipulated without us knowing it, because perhaps they cannot understand certain information. It becomes their battle horse, and they don't realize it. They are playing the game of the powers that be. For example, this happens with the theory of the moon. Many fell for the theory that we didn't go to the moon. The powers that be put out disinformation that makes us doubt that we went to the moon. But they are interested in this doubt, because in this way people don't ask themselves other questions. So with a strategy of distraction, they deviate from the truth and give you another truth, a false truth, because they don't want you to know the real truth. But as everything in the universe has its opposite, is it right to assume that if there are aliens with positive intentions towards us, there has to be a race of, let's call them, negative aliens as well? Undoubtedly, in the universe, negative aliens exist. It is, I would say, an obvious natural fact. The biggest proof that there are negative aliens in the universe are terrestrials. Earthlings are very negative. They are warmongers, rapists, child abusers, organ traffickers, pedophiles. That is, the worst things happen in this world. But we don't travel in the cosmos. Therefore, negative aliens like us have the same history as us. It's not easy to understand this, because to understand this, we must enter into the merits of the spiritual sciences. Who is God? What power does he have? Who is Christ? What power does he have? Who are the angels? What power do they have? If we don't understand this, we can't understand the discourse of the negative alien. So the law of nature, the karmic law, states that when we do evil, we will find it against ourselves. We receive in our life the evil we have done to others, and therefore humanity for thousands of years has never been cohesive. Because evil manages to show solidarity only when it's necessary to obtain the spoils. But when it's time to share the spoils, what do? They shoot each other in the face. Seeing as they are all criminals, everyone wants to take all the spoils. And this attitude of evil causes wars in our world. If we're going to make a truly economic discourse, we see that the powerful, in order to defend their privileges and therefore their riches, squander and destroy an amount of wealth greater than their own riches, which is a paradox. So they destroy the wealth produced by the people to preserve their wealth. But the wealth that they destroy of the people, we are billions of people, our wealth is much bigger than what they have. So this paradox is created. For this reason, negative races like us, who are negative, go from war to war and never manage to reach a level of technological development to be able to cross the immense cosmic spaces. We terrestrials went, I think, 6 times to the moon, but seeing as we did some really crazy things, the astronauts even brought grenade launchers on board. How crazy is that? You go to the moon and take your grenade launcher with you. Because what was NASA's real project? It was to establish a military base on the moon, because all lunar astronauts were military. They weren't civilians. Yes, they were scientists, engineers, but all from the military world. Because the American Horizon project already existed in the early 60s, which was to build a permanent base on the moon and to threaten all the peoples of the Earth with nuclear weapons. That is, the same usual discourse of power. So we went there to carry out experiments, including military ones. And the extraterrestrials, who, as I explained earlier, have had bases on the moon for about 175,000 years, whipped our ass and said, "Enough, we can see you are out of your minds. We will send you home and put you in an embargo. We will no longer let you come to the moon." If you read the articles of the time, all the lunar missions were escorted by flying extraterrestrials. All of them. A mysterious object follows Apollo 12. Who were they? Already, when the Soviets launched Sputnik, which was the first artificial satellite humans ever launched into space, Sputnik was controlled by these extraterrestrial probes. So, the talk of the negative aliens is true, but they do not travel in the cosmos, because they end up like us. They go from war to war. They self-destruct, then they are reborn, then they re-self-destruct again. They are reborn, then they re-self-destruct, until they understand the need for good. Instead, when you understand the need for good, not for religious questions, religious creeds, but for a purely scientific question, civilization stabilizes on an ethical basis. And so there is social justice. Wars cease. Science is no longer blocked or manipulated by economic interests. And then, the rise of scientific technology is very fast, and we reach spaceflight, interplanetary spaceflight. We don't even travel in our solar system. We humans send out robotic probes. We don't physically go to Mars or to Jupiter or Neptune or wherever you want. Because the problem of space travel is not the spacecraft, the energy of the spacecraft, the Star Trek warp drive. The problem is keeping the astronaut healthy, because when you are millions of kilometers from the Earth and you are ill, who do you go to? So the most important science for spaceflight is medical science, biology, medicine, also psychological medicine, because an astronaut in a spaceship who is years away from home goes a little crazy. So the limit of spaceflight is the science on being human. If you are a violent society, out of your minds, going from war to war, you don't get there. Having said that, once a society has stabilized its ethics and science is free, it is no longer bound by the economy and by money, your evolution is infinite. And so these super races, what do? They patrol and control the cosmos to prevent the lizards and madmen from going to cause chaos and violence elsewhere. It's perfectly logical. If we too, a negative race, have the police, security guards and so on, imagine what these beings will have. By being positive, and therefore not going from one collapse to another on a social level, they evolved and they have a technological scientific power, and therefore also a frighteningly advanced military, and so they are absolutely capable of controlling anyone. And, as happened on Earth when we tried to do orbital atomic experiments, they sabotaged them all. Apollo 13 had an atomic warhead on board because they wanted to do an atomic test on the moon. They sabotaged their voyage, and the astronauts of Apollo 13 didn't land on the moon, and they returned home without setting foot on the satellite, bringing the warhead back home with them. So the negative alien absolutely exists, but it is a huge lie spread by the services, the usual problem of disinformation and confusion, so as not to reflect on these very important aspects that I have just explained. So the real enemy therefore hides around the corner and wears a mask, known to us as fellow man. Are we our own worst enemy, known by aliens as an uncontrollable race?
Quello che io direi alle persone in relazione
What I'd say
agli
to
argomenti
people
di cui
in
abbiamo
relation to the
parlato, quindi
topics we have
sia
spoken about,
che cos'è
what
la
is
vera
the true
realtà
extraterrestrial
extraterrestre e sia
reality,
qual è la
what is the
situazione dell'essere
situation for
umano
humans
sulla
on
Terra,
Earth, my
il mio
advice would
consiglio
be,
qual è?
do not rely
Non
on
affidatevi ai
greed, rely on
credo,
logic, rely on
affidatevi alla
ascertained
logica,
facts that must be
affidatevi
forcibly
a fatti
verified.
certi che devono essere forzatamente verificati. Ovviamente comprendo
Obviously, I
benissimo che
understand very
per
well
me che
that
faccio
for
proprio il
me as a
ricercatore è più
researcher, it's
semplice
much
piuttosto
easier
di una
than
persona
for
che
a
lavora in
person
banca
who
o
works
che
in a
fa
bank
la
or who
casalinga,
is a housewife.
eccetera, eccetera. Quindi
Therefore, one
bisogna
must
adottare
adopt
il
discernment
discernimento
and the qui
e
prodest
il qui
to whom it
prodest
is
a chi
convenient.
conviene.
If
Se
we look at these
noi andiamo a
aspects and
vedere
reason
in
with logical
questi aspetti
discernment,
e a
we
ragionare
will be
con
able
logica
to
e
understand
discernimento,
what is
riusciremo a
truth and
capire
what is a lie.
dov'è la verità e dov'è la menzogna. Non è facile.
It isn't easy.
Non è facile.
Obviously, I can't
Ovviamente
tell you, listen to
non vi
what I have
posso
to
dire
tell you.
ascoltate quello
As
che io ho
much
da
as I
dirvi,
explain
per
these
quanto io
things in my
queste cose
lectures, in my
nelle mie
seminars,
conferenze,
my
nei miei
YouTube channel
seminari
is full of
le
information in
spiego,
this
il
sense.
mio canale
What I
YouTube è
can
strapieno
say
di
is to
informazioni
rely
in
on
tal
common
senso. Quello che
sense,
posso dire è
logic.
affidatevi al buon senso, alla logica. Cioè l'umanità non ha un problema
Humanity is
di
not a
dominio
problem of
extraterrestre,
extraterrestrial
ha un
domination.
problema
It
di
has an
terribile e
incredible
cattiva
mismanagement
gestione dei
problem by its
governanti,
governors,
ha un
a
problema di
terrible
terribile e
mismanagement
cattiva
by the
gestione
banks.
delle
We
banche.
are not
Cioè
slaves
noi
to
non
the
siamo
aliens.
schiavi
We
degli
are
alieni,
slaves
siamo
to
schiavi
debt.
del
We are
debito,
slaves
siamo
of the
schiavi delle
banks.
banche,
We are
siamo
slaves of a
schiavi di
corrupt
una
politics
politica
that does
corrotta che
its
fa i
own
suoi interessi
interests,
e che
that promises
promette
when it goes
quando
on an
fa la
electoral
campagna elettorale
campaign
senza
and
poi
never
mai
keeps those promises made.
mantenere le promesse fatte, quindi affidiamoci a
So
questo
let's
buon
rely
senso.
on this
Sono
common
anche
sense.
cosciente per
I'm
esperienza
also
ormai
aware
che
from
non tutti
experience that not
potranno
everyone
capire
will be
questi
able to
discorsi e
understand
che
these
moltissimi,
topics,
credo la
and that
maggioranza
very many,
purtroppo,
I believe the majority,
rimarranno
will unfortunately
ancorati più
remain
che ai
anchored more to
ragionamenti alla
reasoning
logica, alle
than to
tifoserie
logic.
da
The
stadio,
stadium
perché ti
fan
piace quel
syndrome,
ricercatore o
because you prefer
ricercatrice
one
piuttosto che
researcher rather
quell'altro,
than
e
another.
una volta che tu hai
Once you
fatto la
have picked
scelta di
sides,
parte, ovviamente non
obviously it will be
riconoscerai
very
mai o
difficult
sarà molto
to
difficile
recognize that you are
riconoscere che hai
wrong.
sbagliato,
So
quindi
you won't be
rimarrai
left with
non
your
della tua
opinion,
opinione,
you will be left with the
rimarrai
opinion of
dell'opinione
the team you
della
choose.
squadra per la
My
quale tu
problem
tifi.
is that I have to tell the
Libera
truth.
scelta.
Your
Il
problem
mio
is
problema
understanding who
è
is
che
telling
io
the
devo
truth.
dire la verità.
So
Il
I
problema
can't solve
vostro
the
è
whole
che è un problema
problem.
vostro
I can
capire
solve
chi
a part
dice
of
la
it.
verità.
I perform
Quindi io non posso
research. I
risolvere
disseminate
tutto il
research.
problema.
I use logic.
Risolvo una
I use
parte. Io
discernment.
faccio
But then
ricerca, divulgo la
everyone is free to
ricerca,
form
uso la
their own
logica,
opinion.
uso il discernimento, ma
What I
poi
can
ognuno è
testify
libero di
is that
formarsi
good comes from
la propria
space,
opinione.
not evil. We are the ones who do evil on Earth, and this is an absolutely irrefutable historical fact. The universe, an infinite, unknown space, an immense creation full of surprises, where anything and everything is possible. The cradle of life, from which the human race itself, perhaps, comes from.